Poor girl takes a beggar home. The secret about him will leave you speechless. Welcome to Stories, TH. Today, we share an incredible Millionaire Stories video that will inspire your heart and mind. Watch how kindness can change lives in unexpected ways. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories. The cold, relentless drizzle soaked the bustling streets of Brooklyn that evening. Emma pulled her worn jacket tighter around her slender frame as she hurried down the cracked sidewalk, her breath puffing out in quick little clouds in the chilly March air. The streetlights flickered in the wet haze, casting a muted glow on the puddles that had already gathered in the uneven pavement cracks. It was the kind of night where the city felt colder than usual, more unforgiving. Emma's fingers, numb from the cold, clutched her canvas tote bag filled with groceries she had just picked up from the corner bodega. As she passed the familiar corner near Bedford Avenue, something caught her eye, a figure huddled beneath the skeletal remains of a leafless tree. At first, she thought it was just another homeless person, something she had grown accustomed to in the city. But this man looked different somehow. His clothes were threadbare and soaked through, clinging to his thin frame, exposing the sharp outline of his ribs. His face, streaked with grime and shadowed by a battered baseball cap, was pale and gaunt. He shivered violently, his shoulders rising and falling rapidly as the cold wind sliced through the night. Emma's heart clenched. She hesitated for a moment, torn between the instinct to keep walking and a rising tide of compassion. The man's desperate eyes met hers, wide and pleading. There was a vulnerability there that went beyond mere circumstance, something raw and human that she couldn't ignore. Her breath caught as she stepped closer, the uneven cobblestones making her footsteps echo softly in the stillness. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice nearly lost in the steady patter of rain. He looked up, startled, then shook his head slowly. "No," he murmured, voice hoarse and barely audible. "I'm freezing." The chill in his voice matched the cold biting at her fingertips. Emma glanced down at his threadbare jacket, soaked through and riddled with holes. The realization struck her hard. This man was truly struggling, not just with poverty, but with survival. Her thoughts raced. She lived alone in a small, cramped apartment just a few blocks away. It wasn't much, but it was warm. She had a hot shower, clean clothes, and a bed she didn't have to share. Could she invite this stranger in? Was it safe? Was it crazy? Yet, despite the nagging caution, her heart won out. "Come with me," she said softly, holding out her hand. He hesitated for only a moment before grasping it, his skin cold and clammy against hers. Together, they navigated the slick streets toward her apartment building, the world around them blurred by the rain and city lights. Emma's pulse quickened, not just from the cold or the quick pace, but from the sheer weight of what she was doing. She was taking a chance, opening her door to a stranger in need. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wave. The small apartment smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Emma guided him to the living room and helped him remove his wet jacket, revealing the shivering figure beneath. She fetched a blanket and wrapped it tightly around his shoulders. He sank into the worn couch, the exhaustion and cold evident in the slump of his posture. Emma sat nearby, unsure how to fill the silence. Her eyes kept darting to him, this man, who seemed so broken, yet somehow dignified in his quiet endurance. "Do you want some tea?" she offered, heading to the tiny kitchen to boil water on the stove. The kettle's whistle was a comforting sound, a stark contrast to the harsh noise of the rain outside. When she returned with the steaming mug, he took it with trembling hands, sipping slowly, as if the warmth was a balm to more than just his body. Emma watched him, her mind swirling with questions. Who was he? What had led him here, to this desperate state? His eyes, though weary, held stories she could only imagine. As the night deepened, Emma found herself sharing bits about her own life, her struggles working 2 part-time jobs, her dreams of someday leaving this small apartment for something better. The man listened quietly, offering small nods, his gaze occasionally flickering with a glimmer of something: hope, regret, gratitude. There was an undeniable connection forming between them, 2 souls, brought together by circumstance, by need, by the sheer randomness of the city. Outside, the rain began to taper off. the steady drizzle turning into a light mist. Emma looked out the window, her heart heavy, yet oddly full. In the midst of a city that often felt cold and indifferent, she had found a moment of warmth, a flicker of humanity that reminded her why she stayed, why she fought. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't even know this man's name yet. But in this small apartment on a rain-soaked night, two strangers found a fragile kind of hope, one that whispered of second chances, of kindness, and of the unexpected ways lives can intersect. The rain hadn't eased up. It drummed steadily against the grimy windows of Emma's tiny Brooklyn apartment as she fumbled with her keys, hands trembling not just from the chill, but from a surge of nervous energy. The dim glow from the street lamp outside barely penetrated the gloom of the narrow hallway as she pushed the door open and stepped inside. Her shoes squeaked faintly on the worn wooden floor, a stark contrast to the pounding storm just minutes ago. Her mind was still racing, tangled in a mess of doubts and fears, but also an undeniable compassion that refused to let her turn away. She glanced back toward the street through the fogged glass of her front door. The man, Jack, she had learned his name, was still out there, lingering under the flickering streetlight, his thin jacket soaked through, the collar pulled up against the relentless wind. Emma bit her lip. Every rational voice in her head screamed that inviting a stranger inside was reckless, foolish even. Brooklyn was no place for naive generosity. The city had taught her that much. Stories of scams and worse played on a loop in her memory, warnings echoed by friends and strangers alike. But the gnawing thought of leaving someone out in the cold, vulnerable and alone, gnawed at her conscience. Her apartment was small, barely 400 square feet, crammed with secondhand furniture and the kind of clutter that comes from living paycheck to paycheck. It wasn't much, but it was warm. It had a working heater, a hot shower, and a bed she didn't have to share with roommates or street noises. She moved quickly, flicking on the lights. The soft yellow glow revealed the modest chaos of her life. Stacks of overdue bills on the kitchen table, a half-read novel on the couch, a pair of worn sneakers by the door. She walked over to the coat rack, pulling her damp jacket free and hanging it to dry. The cold air from the outside still clung stubbornly to her clothes, but inside, the apartment radiated a quiet comfort. Emma turned toward the door, and without another thought, she opened it wide, stepping onto the stoop. "Jack," she called softly, "come on in." He looked up, eyes wide with surprise, and for a moment, something unreadable flickered across his features. Relief, perhaps, or disbelief. Slowly, he nodded, stepping inside with hesitant, almost careful movements. His soaked shoes left dark footprints on the hardwood as he closed the door behind him. Emma led him into the cramped living room, watching as he sank onto the threadbare couch, still shivering. She moved to the thermostat and cranked the heat higher, hoping the old radiator would kick in quickly. "I hope you don't mind the mess," she said, attempting lightness, but her voice wavered with unease. "It's not much, but it's warm." Jack managed a faint smile. "Thank you," he whispered, voice rough and tired. I didn't expect this." Emma nodded, setting down a steaming mug of tea she had hurriedly brewed. The scent of chamomile filled the room, a fragile comfort against the harshness of the night. She sat on the edge of the couch, close enough to offer warmth, but distant enough to respect the invisible line between host and stranger. The silence between them was heavy, full of unspoken questions and cautious curiosity. Emma's eyes flicked over him, noting the bruises on his knuckles, the faint scars visible where the collar of his jacket had shifted. There was a story there, one that didn't match the man who had sat silently sipping tea moments ago. "What happened to you?" she finally asked, voice gentle but probing. Jack's gaze dropped to his hands. "Life took some hard turns," he said quietly. "Lost my job, my home, everything. I didn't want to be out there, but there weren't many choices." Emma's heart ached. She had felt the sting of hardship herself, the grinding weight of bills and uncertainty. But this was different. This was survival stripped to its barest form. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, feeling the slight tremble beneath the thin fabric. "You're safe here," she said firmly, almost to convince herself as much as him. For the first time, Jack looked directly at her, his eyes shimmering with gratitude and something more hope, maybe. "Thank you, Emma, for seeing me." Emma swallowed hard, the loneliness of her own nights suddenly mingling with the rawness in his words. "Everyone deserves a little kindness," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. As the night deepened, they talked quietly, exchanging fragments of their lives, stories punctuated by moments of laughter and tears. Emma learned that Jack had once been a successful architect, a man with plans and dreams shattered by circumstance beyond his control. And Jack discovered that beneath Emma's quiet strength was a woman fiercely determined to keep going, no matter how tough the road. Outside, the rain began to lighten, softening to a drizzle. Inside, the warmth grew, not just from the heater, but from the fragile connection forming between two strangers bound by the city's unpredictable tides. Emma knew the risks opening her door to a man she barely knew, inviting uncertainty into her fragile world. But as she watched Jack finally relax, the tension easing from his shoulders, she understood something vital. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is offer a little light in the darkest storm. And tonight, that light was theirs to share. The man who had accepted Emma's invitation to escape the relentless Brooklyn rain introduced himself simply as Jack. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile truce he'd forged with the world. There was a humility in the way he spoke, a soft-spoken gratitude that tugged at Emma's heart, yet his eyes, those guarded, deep-set eyes, told a different story. They darted quickly around the room, always alert, never quite settling, as if he were carrying invisible chains forged by a shadowy past. Emma watched him carefully from the worn armchair across the room, clutching her chipped ceramic mug of tea. The steam curled gently upward, mingling with the faint scent of lavender that lingered in the small apartment. Jack's hands, rough and weathered, trembled slightly as he cradled his own cup, seeking warmth not just from the liquid, but from the rare kindness he had found. Despite the modest comfort of the space, Emma sensed a barrier between them, an invisible wall built from years of hardship and secrets. Jack's posture was slightly hunched, as if bracing against an unseen storm, his gaze flickering to the door every so often, reminding Emma that trust was a fragile thing. "Thank you," he murmured again, eyes briefly meeting hers with a flicker of sincerity before darting away. "I'm not used to this kindness," Emma offered a small, encouraging smile. "You don't have to be. It's okay to accept it sometimes." He nodded, but there was hesitation there, like a man who'd learned to expect disappointment rather than comfort. Emma's mind raced with questions, but she knew better than to pry too soon. The truth was, the shadows in his eyes beckoned with a tantalizing mystery she felt compelled to unravel, but she also understood the delicate dance of patience required when dealing with someone guarding wounds invisible to the naked eye. Jack shifted in his seat, the blanket Emma had wrapped around him, barely disguising the tension in his muscles. "I've been through a lot," he finally said, voice rough but controlled. "Lost things. People." His words hung heavy in the air, laden with an unspoken pain that filled the small room. Emma's heart ached at the vulnerability beneath his stoic exterior. "You're safe here," she assured him softly. "No judgments." For a moment, Jack's eyes softened a glimpse of the man beneath the scars. Yet even as he relaxed, that guarded spark lingered. He wasn't just a man down on his luck. He was a soul weathered by storms far deeper than Emma could yet comprehend. As the minutes stretched into quiet companionship, Emma noticed small contradictions, a subtle twitch of the jaw when a memory surfaced, a momentary flinch at a sudden noise outside, the way his gaze lingered on the flickering streetlight as if searching for something lost. Emma realized that Jack carried more than just the cold of the night on his skin. He bore the weight of a past he wasn't ready to share, a history etched into the very lines of his face and the cautious way he moved through her apartment. Yet, despite the mystery, despite the invisible walls, there was an undeniable humanity shining through a flicker of hope, fragile but persistent, that maybe this night, in this tiny apartment, filled with the scent of tea and the quiet hum of the city beyond, could mark a new beginning for them both. Emma's curiosity mingled with caution, a delicate balance between reaching out and respecting the shadows that cloaked Jack's story. And as she watched him finally lower his guard just a little, she knew this was only the first step in a journey. Neither of them could have predicted one where trust would be earned, secrets gently unveiled, and perhaps healing found in the most unexpected places. Over the next few days, Emma's small Brooklyn apartment became a quiet refuge from the harsh reality outside. The cold wind still howled past the cracked window panes at night, and the relentless drizzle left the sidewalk slick with rain. But inside, a fragile bubble of warmth and tentative trust was growing between Emma and Jack. Despite her own financial struggles, Emma found herself sharing whatever meager meals she could manage with Jack. Their dinners were often simple leftover pasta reheated in a microwave, small cans of soup, or the occasional sandwich made with day-old bread from the corner deli. Emma watched him eat with a mix of relief and guilt. Every bite he took was a small victory over hunger, yet each meal reminded her of the precariousness of her own situation. She worked 2 part-time jobs, a cashier at a grocery store and a barista at a nearby cafe. The combined income barely covered the rent on her 350-square-foot apartment and the ever-increasing bills. There were nights when she skipped dinner herself, telling herself she'd eat tomorrow just to stretch her paycheck a little further. But now, with Jack sitting across from her at the tiny kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, those sacrifices felt more urgent, more complicated. Emma's heart tightened when she caught the faint flicker of embarrassment in Jack's eyes as he ate. He never complained, but she could see the weight of pride lingering beneath his gratitude. They were both navigating uncertain territory, 2 strangers thrown together by circumstance, bound by unspoken questions and cautious hope. Yet with every passing day, a growing tension gnawed at Emma's thoughts. Was she making a mistake? Inviting a stranger, someone whose past she knew nothing about, into her life, into the one small sanctuary she had managed to carve out for herself? The city was full of stories like hers, stories of misplaced trust and the harsh consequences that followed. There were moments when Emma found herself watching Jack as he stared out the rain-speckled window, his face shadowed and distant. She wondered what ghosts haunted him, what memories made his eyes cloud over, or his jaw clench tightly. His silence was both a comfort and a barrier, a reminder that while he was here now, fully present in the space they shared, parts of him remained locked away. One chilly evening, as the city's lights flickered against the wet streets, Emma sat beside Jack on the worn couch, a thin blanket draped over their shoulders. She dared to break the silence, her voice tentative but sincere. "Jack, do you ever think about what comes next? About where you want to go from here?" He looked at her then, the guarded walls around his eyes softening for a brief moment. "Every day," he admitted, "but sometimes the next step feels impossible." Emma reached out, placing her hand gently over his. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of a promise of shared struggle, of silent solidarity. Despite the fears and doubts swirling in her mind, Emma found herself unwilling to turn away. Jack's presence stirred something she hadn't realized she was missing: a connection, a reminder that even in the toughest times, there was room for kindness, for trust. But the city outside was unforgiving, and Emma knew that the fragile bubble they'd created could burst at any moment. There were unanswered questions, risks lurking just beyond the threshold, and a future uncertain for both of them. Still, as they sat together, sharing warmth and meager meals, Emma held on to a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through the storm together. Emma sat at the small kitchen table, the late afternoon sunlight filtering weakly through the thin curtains of her Brooklyn apartment. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her best friend, Sarah. Emma hesitated before opening it. Sarah's words were filled with concern, bordering on panic. "Emma, please be careful. You don't know this guy. Trusting strangers, especially someone who's been on the streets, can be dangerous. You don't want to end up hurt or worse." Emma sighed, feeling the familiar tightening in her chest. The warnings from her friends had become almost constant over the past few days. Every time she mentioned Jack's name, their faces would harden with worry. Sarah, Jenna, even her cousin Mike had voiced their fears loudly and repeatedly. "You don't know who he really is," Jenna had said bluntly during coffee last week. "He could be dangerous or have some kind of agenda. You have to think about your safety." Emma understood their anxiety. Brooklyn wasn't always kind, and stories of scams and worse were as common as the subway trains that rumbled beneath the city. She had heard them all: women taken advantage of, people disappearing after trusting the wrong person, and the cold, harsh reality of life for many in the city's shadows. But Emma couldn't shake the image of Jack, the way he had shivered on that rainy corner, the fragile hope that flickered behind his guarded eyes. The man she had taken into her home was not a threat. He was someone broken, someone in desperate need of help. She ran her fingers over the chipped paint of the table as she thought about their conversations, the way Jack had quietly opened up about his struggles, never once asking for anything beyond a safe place to rest. It wasn't just pity that moved her, it was something deeper: compassion, empathy, and a hope that her small act of kindness might make a difference. One evening, Sarah had come over unannounced, her face pale and eyes wide with concern. "Emma, please don't do this to yourself," she pleaded, holding Emma's hands tightly. "I know you want to help, but this could ruin your life. You're already struggling. Bringing someone like this into your world, it's risky." Emma had looked into Sarah's worried eyes and felt a pang of guilt. She knew Sarah was right to worry, but the thought of turning Jack away, sending him back to the cold streets, felt unbearable. She wanted to believe that kindness could survive even in the harshest of places. "I'm not blind to the risks," Emma had replied softly, "but sometimes you have to trust your heart, even if your mind is screaming, 'Danger.' I can't just ignore him. He needs me." Her friends didn't understand the quiet courage it took to open her door to someone so vulnerable. They saw only the danger. Emma saw the man beneath the fear, the person who had once dreamed and loved and hoped. Still, the tension grew. Emma found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering if she had made a mistake. The uncertainty gnawed at her, mixing with the warmth she felt when Jack smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up the dim corners of her apartment. She wrestled with her fears in the quiet moments alone, the city's noise filtering through the walls like a distant reminder of the world outside. Would her kindness be rewarded, or would it cost her more than she was willing to pay? Despite the anxiety, Emma refused to let go of hope. She believed that everyone deserved a second chance, that beneath the scars and struggles, there was still goodness waiting to be found. And so, with a heart full of cautious optimism and a mind shadowed by doubt, Emma continued to share her small apartment, her meager meals, and the fragile light of human connection with Jack, holding on to the belief that sometimes the greatest risk is also the greatest reward. Jack remained a mystery wrapped in silence. Though Emma had opened her door and her heart to him, he kept the details of his past tightly guarded, revealing just enough to pique her curiosity, but never enough to satisfy it. In the small Brooklyn apartment where they now shared fleeting moments of warmth, his reticence became a palpable presence, as tangible as the chill that seeped through the cracked window panes on cold nights. Emma noticed how Jack carefully avoided certain topics, deftly changing the subject whenever she tried to ask about his life before the streets. At times, he would smile faintly and say, "It's complicated," or "Some things are better left behind." But his eyes, those deep, guarded eyes, always told a different story. There was pain there, wrapped in layers of regret, and maybe even fear. She found herself watching him more closely. The way he tensed when a news report flickered on the TV, the brief flinches when a phone rang unexpectedly, how he often stared out the rain-speckled window, lost in thought. All these small details suggested a man carrying heavy burdens, ghosts from a past he was reluctant to share. Emma's mind swirled with questions. Who was Jack before he became the man she saw now? What had he lost? Was he hiding from something or someone? The more he dodged her inquiries, the more her suspicions grew. She wondered if there was a reason he didn't trust her fully yet, or if he even trusted himself. One evening, after a quiet dinner of canned soup and stale bread, Emma gathered her courage and spoke softly. "Jack, I want to understand. You don't have to tell me everything, but maybe just a little. It might help me know how to support you better." Jack looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. Then, as if wrestling with a storm inside, he finally exhaled a breath he'd been holding. "I wasn't always like this," he said quietly, voice rough with years of weariness. "I had a career, a home, people I cared about, but things fell apart fast and hard. I made mistakes. Big ones." Emma's heart ached as she listened. The man sitting before her was not just a stranger or a passerby in her life, but someone broken by circumstance and haunted by regrets. "What kind of mistakes?" she asked gently, not pushing, but hoping he'd trust her enough to share. Jack's eyes darkened. "That's the thing. Some mistakes don't have easy explanations. They cost more than money or time. They cost you everything." His voice cracked just slightly, revealing a vulnerability he seldom showed. Emma reached out, placing a comforting hand over his. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." For a fleeting moment, Jack allowed a small, genuine smile to touch his lips, the first sign of hope she'd seen in days. Yet, beneath that smile, lingered the shadow of a past he still fought to escape. Emma realized then that Jack's silence was not just about hiding shame or fear, but about protecting himself from wounds that might never fully heal. She knew patience would be their ally, that trust could not be rushed, but nurtured slowly, day by day. And so, as the rain continued to fall softly outside, two weary souls found comfort in the fragile threads of honesty beginning to weave between them. Though much remained unspoken, the quiet presence of understanding and hope filled the small apartment, a beacon in the darkness of their intertwined lives. The evening had settled quietly over Brooklyn, the city's usual hustle dimming, as the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. Emma was folding laundry in the cramped living room of her modest apartment, the soft hum of the heater mixing with the distant sounds of car tires skimming wet pavement outside. She glanced over at her aging laptop sitting on the rickety kitchen table, a device she barely had the money to keep connected to the internet. Jack sat beside it, his posture tense but focused, eyes scanning the screen intently. Curiosity stirred within Emma. She hadn't seen Jack so absorbed before. For days, he had kept his distance, careful to blend into the background of her life. But tonight, something was different. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, she stepped closer, watching as his fingers hovered over the keyboard with surprising precision. The screen glowed softly, displaying rows of numbers and graphs, a stock market report. Her brow furrowed. The financial jargon and charts were foreign to her, a stark contrast to the world she knew, one defined by hourly wages and careful budgeting. Yet Jack navigated the pages with a strange ease, scrolling through updates on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, NASDAQ, and S&P 500. It was a language he spoke fluently, one that hinted at a past Emma hadn't yet glimpsed. "Jack?" she ventured softly, trying not to startle him. "You know about this stuff?" He looked up abruptly, his eyes catching hers for a moment, before he quickly averted his gaze. There was a flicker of hesitation, then something akin to pride in his expression. "I used to," he replied, voice low but steady. "It's complicated." Emma swallowed, heart pounding. The man she had taken in the one shrouded in mystery and guarded silence was someone who once belonged to a world she had only glimpsed through news reports and casual conversations. The weight of that realization sent a ripple of intrigue through her. "Why are you looking at this now?" she asked, her tone gentle but curious. Jack's fingers resumed their dance over the keyboard, pulling up more detailed analytics company earnings, stock trends, market forecasts. "I'm trying to figure out where I stand," he said finally, "trying to see if there's still a way back." Emma felt a pang of empathy. She had seen the hope flicker briefly in his eyes, a fragile ember, fighting to survive amid the rubble of his past. This moment, him poring over market data in her tiny kitchen, spoke volumes about the man he once was and the man he hoped to become. She settled into the chair beside him, watching the glow of the screen illuminate the lines etched into his face. For the first time, the distance between them seemed to shrink, replaced by a shared silence filled with unspoken stories. "Do you miss it?" Emma asked quietly. "The life you had?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "More than I can say. But it's not just about missing the money or status. It's about identity, who I was, who I want to be again. Emma reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. You're more than what you lost. He met her gaze then, eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and guarded hope. Maybe, he whispered, maybe there's still a chance. Outside, the rain tapered off completely, leaving the city bathed in the soft glow of streetlights and neon signs. Inside, in that tiny apartment, two lives, fractured but slowly healing, found a moment of connection, a spark of possibility amid uncertainty. Emma knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with questions and challenges yet to come. But tonight, watching Jack immerse himself in a world she barely understood, she felt a quiet conviction that sometimes the first step toward redemption was simply daring to look at the past with open eyes and a hopeful heart. The air in Emma's tiny Brooklyn apartment was thick with the quiet hum of evening. Outside, the streets glistened from the recent rain, streetlights casting a soft orange glow onto the wet pavement. Emma sat curled up on the threadbare couch, a worn blanket draped over her knees, her gaze lingering on Jack as he sat across from her at the small kitchen table. He was hunched forward slightly, fingers tapping anxiously against the wooden surface as he stared at the glowing screen of her old laptop. For days now, Jack had remained a shadow of himself, quiet, withdrawn, cautious. His eyes, once sharp and guarded, often seemed clouded with distant memories and pain Emma couldn't yet understand. She'd seen glimpses of vulnerability beneath his rugged exterior and moments where his past haunted him like a ghost he couldn't outrun. But tonight, something was different. There was a tension in the room, subtle but electric, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Emma glanced away for a moment, wrapping her fingers tightly around her mug of lukewarm tea. The uncertainty of their situation pressed against her heart like a weight she wasn't sure she could carry. She had invited this man, this stranger, into her life, into her sanctuary, despite all the warnings, doubts, and fears. And now, as the hours slipped by, she wondered if the risks were greater than she'd imagined. Suddenly, the shrill ring of Jack's phone shattered the silence, jolting them both. The sound seemed almost jarring against the quiet backdrop of the city's night. Emma's heart leapt, her eyes locking onto Jack as he reached into his pocket with steady hands, retrieving the device. The moment Jack answered, the entire atmosphere in the room shifted. Gone was the hesitant, tired man she'd come to know over the past week. His shoulders straightened, his jaw clenched with resolve, and a sharp, commanding tone cut through the calm like a blade. Emma's breath caught as she watched the transformation. Jack's voice was firm, confident, and unmistakably authoritative. "Yes," he said crisply. "I've reviewed the figures. The projections are optimistic, but we need to adjust our strategy. No, the current approach won't suffice." His eyes narrowed, focused, reflecting the cold glint of a man used to making decisions, giving orders. "Prepare the team for a shift in focus. I want a detailed report by tomorrow morning." Emma blinked, stunned. The man before her was a far cry from the quiet, vulnerable figure who had been clinging to survival just days before. This was someone else entirely, a leader, a force to be reckoned with. Her mind raced to reconcile the two versions of Jack, the man who sought refuge in her apartment and this commanding figure wielding power and influence through a simple phone call. Jack's gaze flicked briefly toward Emma as he listened, but he didn't soften. His posture was rigid, unyielding. The conversation was short but intense, filled with clipped instructions and strategic decisions that suggested a high-stakes world she hadn't been aware he inhabited. When he finally ended the call, Jack's expression remained unreadable. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, the shift from confident executive back to the weary man, palpable but incomplete. Emma swallowed hard, struggling to find her voice. "Jack, what was that?" she asked cautiously, her curiosity battling with the cautious fear rising in her chest. He hesitated, his eyes meeting hers for a moment that felt like an eternity. "It's complicated," he said quietly. "That was work. Something I can't really talk about right now." Emma nodded slowly, the pieces beginning to fall into place. She had sensed that Jack's past was far more intricate than he'd let on, but hearing the commanding tone, Witnessing that sudden change, it made everything real in a way she hadn't been ready for. "Are you someone important?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jack gave a short, almost rueful smile. "You could say that. At least I used to be." The room seemed to shrink around them, the comfortable familiarity replaced by a tangible tension. Emma realized she was staring at a man living between two worlds, one grounded in harsh reality and survival, the other steeped in power, responsibility, and secrets. For a moment, silence settled over the apartment again, but this time it was heavy with unspoken questions and the weight of uncertainty. Emma's mind swirled with thoughts. Who was Jack really? Why had he ended up on the streets? What had forced this powerful man into hiding? Jack's gaze drifted to the window, watching the rain-slick streets outside. "There's a lot I need to explain," he said softly. "But not yet. It's not safe." Emma's heart pounded in her chest, the fear of the unknown mingling with a growing determination. She didn't know the full story, but one thing was clear. Jack was caught in something far bigger than either of them had imagined. And as she looked into his eyes that now held a flicker of that commanding fire she'd just witnessed, Emma knew their lives were about to change forever. For the first time since he'd come into her life, she saw a glimpse of the man Jack truly was. Not just a stranger seeking shelter, but a man with a past that could shatter their fragile new beginning, and a future that might just be worth fighting for. Emma woke to the soft gray light filtering through the thin curtains of her Brooklyn apartment. The usual sounds of the city waking up honking cars, distant sirens. The occasional shout felt muted today, almost as if the city itself held its breath. She glanced over to the worn couch where Jack had spent the night, only to find it empty. Her heart tightened in confusion and unease. Jack was gone. The small coffee table bore the traces of last night's meager dinner, an empty soup can, 2 half-finished cups of tea, and a crumpled blanket. Emma's mind raced as she tried to piece together what had happened. No note, no message, nothing. Just silence, where there had been a fragile connection. Panic fluttered in her chest. She quickly scanned the apartment. Had he left in a hurry? Was he okay? The cold Brooklyn morning air seeped through the gaps in the window frames, making her shiver as worry settled deep inside her. She pulled on her coat and stepped outside, hoping to find him somewhere nearby. The streets were busy with the usual morning rush. Delivery trucks backing into narrow alleys, pedestrians hustling past coffee carts, the scent of fresh bagels mingling with the crisp spring air. But Jack was nowhere to be found. Emma walked to the corner cafe where she sometimes worked, thinking maybe he had tried to find shelter there or hoped for some warmth. The barista shook her head when Emma asked about a man fitting Jack's description. No sign. She wandered through nearby parks, under flickering streetlights, still lingering from last night, and past busy subway entrances, scanning every face, every shadow. Her thoughts spiraled. Who was Jack really? What secrets had he left behind in the cold? Was she foolish to trust someone so elusive? Back in her apartment, Emma sat heavily on the couch, clutching a worn blanket to her chest. The silence around her felt deafening. Questions hammered in her mind. Why had he disappeared without a word? Had he been running from something or someone all along? As hours slipped by, Emma's anxiety morphed into determination. She couldn't just wait and wonder. She decided to look through the few things Jack had left behind. Some worn clothes folded neatly in a corner, a battered notebook with pages filled with indecipherable scribbles, and a crumpled photo of a city skyline at dusk. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the notebook, trying to catch a glimpse of the man beneath the mystery. The writing was erratic, full of dates, names, and cryptic notes. She noticed words like investment, deadline, and trust. It was clear Jack's life was tangled in something far more complex than she had imagined. Memories of their conversations flooded back his fleeting smiles, the shadows in his eyes, the guarded moments when he avoided questions. She realized how little she truly knew about him and how much she longed to. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Emma returned to the cafe, hoping for news, checking with neighbors, even posting flyers with a photo of Jack and a plea for information. But nothing came. Her friends urged caution. He's a stranger, Emma, Sarah said firmly one evening as they sat in the dimly lit kitchen. You don't even know what he's capable of. Maybe it's better if you let him go. But Emma shook her head. I don't want to believe that. There's more to him. I have to know. That night, as she lay awake listening to the city's distant hum, Emma whispered into the darkness, Where are you, Jack? Who are you really? In the quiet spaces of her heart, she held on to hope, a fragile flame refusing to be extinguished by doubt. She knew their story was far from over, that the man she had welcomed into her life carried secrets heavy as the Brooklyn skyline. And somewhere out there, beneath the same stars that watched over her apartment, Jack's journey continued unseen, uncertain, but not forgotten. Emma sat on her small, creaky sofa, her eyes glued to the flickering screen of her smartphone. The rain drummed steadily against the windowpane of her modest Brooklyn apartment, a rhythmic backdrop to the storm brewing inside her thoughts. She had just finished her late-night shift at the local cafe, exhaustion pulling at every muscle, yet sleep felt elusive. Instead, she was scrolling through the news app she kept out of habit, a faint hope of distraction guiding her thumb. Then a headline caught her eye, a breaking news alert that sent a jolt through her weary body. Reclusive Tech CEO steps down amid scandal. The words blinked on her screen, stark and mysterious. Emma's heart quickened as she tapped the article open, the screen illuminating her tired face in the dim light. The article detailed the sudden resignation of Maxwell Carter, the enigmatic CEO of Nexitech, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Silicon Valley. Known for his brilliant mind and equally elusive presence, Carter had rarely been seen in public or given interviews, yet his impact on the industry was undeniable, a visionary who had pushed boundaries and reshaped how technology intertwined with everyday life. But now, the news was murky. The resignation came amid whispers of an undisclosed scandal, a cloud of suspicion hanging over the company and its leader. The article was vague, mentioning only that an internal investigation was underway and that the company's board would soon appoint an interim CEO. It hinted at financial irregularities and potential breaches of trust, but offered no concrete details. Emma's mind reeled. The name Maxwell Carter sparked a flicker of recognition, something just beyond her grasp. She glanced around her tiny apartment, the familiar clutter of overdue bills and thrift store furniture grounding her in reality. Yet, the news felt personal, resonating deeper than mere headlines should. Her thoughts immediately raced to Jack. Could it be possible? The man she had taken in, the stranger with haunted eyes and guarded secrets, was he somehow connected to this story? The way Jack had studied the stock market reports, his sudden authoritative phone call, the layers of mystery he wrapped around himself. All these pieces began to click into place, weaving a tapestry of questions she wasn't sure she wanted answers to. Emma's fingers trembled as she scrolled for more information, but the coverage was limited, filled with speculation and cautious corporate statements. The city outside her window seemed distant, the usual din muted as if the world had paused for this moment. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, breaking the spell. Hey, did you see the news? That Nexitech CEO stepping down? Seems huge. Emma hesitated before replying, unsure how much to reveal. Yeah, just saw it. It feels connected somehow. Sarah's response was quick. Be careful, Emma. I don't want you to get hurt. If Jack is involved, you need to protect yourself. Emma sighed, a swirl of fear and determination settling in her chest. She knew the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but abandoning Jack now felt impossible. The next morning, she visited the local library, eager to dig deeper into Maxwell Carter's story. She sifted through archived articles, interviews, and forum discussions, piecing together the portrait of a man who was brilliant yet elusive, celebrated yet shrouded in rumors. One piece stood out a profile highlighting Carter's rise from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of the tech world, marked by relentless innovation, but also whispered controversies about his management style and personal life. Emma felt a pang of empathy. Here was a man whose public persona masked a complex, troubled reality much like Jack. Back in her apartment, she stared at the framed photo on her nightstand, a simple snapshot of the city skyline at dusk. She whispered to herself, "Who are you really, Jack? And how deep does this go?" Days passed with little new information, But Emma's resolve grew. She balanced her work shifts with moments spent researching and reflecting, grappling with the unknown chapters of Jack's life. Then one afternoon, as sunlight filtered weakly through gray clouds, her phone buzzed with a new notification, an exclusive interview scheduled with the interim Nexitech CEO, promising revelations about the company's future and the fallout from Carter's resignation. Emma watched the interview unfold on her screen, heart pounding, as the new CEO addressed the scandal with careful words, acknowledging challenges, but vowing transparency and renewal. She felt a mix of hope and anxiety. The story wasn't over, not for the company, not for Jack, and not for herself. That night, Emma sat by her window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. She held Jack's blanket close, her thoughts a tangle of questions and quiet prayers. Somewhere out there, the man she had come to care for was navigating a storm far bigger than either of them had imagined, and she vowed silently to stand by him, no matter where the truth led. Emma sat in the dim glow of her living room, the light from her laptop casting shadows across her tired face. She had been scrolling through news updates all morning, trying to piece together the fragmented story of Nathan Brooks, the reclusive tech CEO, who had suddenly stepped down amid whispers of scandal. Every headline seemed to add more questions than answers. Yet, despite the swirling chaos in the media, Emma couldn't shake the growing feeling deep in her gut. Something about Nathan Brooks felt intimately familiar. She had heard the name before, of course. Everyone in the city knew the story of the mysterious billionaire who had built an empire out of thin air, only to retreat into the shadows when controversy hit. But what no one knew was the truth. She was now beginning to see a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about Jack, the man she had taken into her small Brooklyn apartment just weeks ago. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clicked on an article titled "The Fall of a Titan, Nathan Brooks' Sudden Resignation." The page loaded slowly, revealing a grainy photo of the CEO, a photo Emma had seen before. Or rather, she had seen the man in her apartment sitting across from her, wrapped in a thin blanket, eyes haunted, yet full of quiet strength. And now, here was the same face staring back at her from the screen. The shock hit her like a thunderclap. Jack, the man who had begged on the street corner during a rainy Brooklyn night, was Nathan Brooks. Emma's heart pounded as she stared at the image. The CEO in the photo had the same rugged features, the same intense, guarded eyes she had come to know so well. The contrast between the two realities was staggering. How could someone who commanded boardrooms and wielded influence on a global scale be the same man she had seen shivering in tattered clothes, desperate for shelter? Tears welled up unexpectedly. The weight of the discovery pressed down on her chest. For weeks, she had nurtured a fragile trust with Jack, sharing her modest meals and offering warmth in a world that had been cruel to both of them. Now, everything felt uncertain. Who was this man, really? And why had he hidden this part of himself from her? The article went on to describe Nathan's sudden withdrawal from the company he had founded, a move that shocked investors and employees alike. Speculation swirled around internal conflicts, allegations of corporate sabotage, and rumors of a personal scandal that had yet to be fully uncovered. But none of that explained why he had vanished from the public eye, why he had ended up on the streets of Brooklyn, or why he had come to Emma's door, a stranger in need. Emma closed the laptop slowly, her mind racing. She thought back to the moments they had shared, the cautious smiles, the moments of vulnerability, the silent understanding that passed between them without words. Jack had trusted her in small ways, but there was so much he had left unsaid. Her curiosity deepened, mingling with concern. What dangers lurked in his past? What had forced him into hiding? And more importantly, what was she getting herself into by staying by his side? She paced the small apartment, the worn wooden floor creaking under her steps. The city outside buzzed with its usual energy, oblivious to the storm swirling within these four walls. Emma felt torn between fear and compassion, between the instinct to protect herself and the desire to help the man who had touched her life in ways she hadn't expected. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the room, Emma sat back down with a renewed determination. She resolved to uncover the truth, not just for her own peace of mind, but to understand the man behind the facade, the man who had trusted her enough to cross the threshold of his past and enter her life. In the quiet moments that followed, Emma whispered softly to the empty room, "Who are you really, Jack? And how do we find our way through this together?" Her voice was barely audible, but in that question lay the fragile hope of a new beginning, a hope that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. Emma sat silently on the worn couch, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of the blanket draped over her lap. The small Brooklyn apartment, usually a place of modest comfort, felt suffocating to night walls closing in around her as she grappled with a truth that refused to settle. Just hours ago, the man she had sheltered, shared meals with, and begun to trust had revealed a secret so profound that it shattered the fragile world she had been piecing together. Jack, the weary, guarded man she had taken in from the cold, was not the broken soul she had imagined. He was, in fact, a powerful figure, a millionaire CEO, once at the pinnacle of success, who had somehow found himself living on the streets. The revelation collided with Emma's understanding of the world, sending shockwaves of disbelief coursing through her. Her mind replayed every moment, every gesture, every word from Jack that now took on a new, haunting significance. How could someone so influential, with resources and connections beyond her wildest dreams, end up so destitute? What forces had driven him to such extremes? And why had he hidden this part of himself from her? Emma's thoughts spiraled into confusion and sorrow. The city outside buzzed with life, the distant honking of cars, the muffled conversations of neighbors, the occasional siren slicing through the night. But inside, time seemed to stand still, weighted down by the enormity of Jack's secret. She recalled the first day she found him shivering on that rain-soaked corner, the vulnerability etched on his face, the kindness that had compelled her to invite him into her home. She thought of his quiet resilience, the moments of quiet strength that had slowly chipped away at her fears. Yet, all along, he had been hiding a reality so starkly different that it threatened to unravel everything. Emma's heart ached with a complex mix of empathy and bewilderment. She could not reconcile the image of Jack, the powerful CEO used to commanding boardrooms and making high-stakes decisions, with the man who had quietly accepted her hospitality, seemingly stripped of everything. The more she pondered, the more questions gnawed at her. Had pride forced him into silence? Had circumstances beyond his control brought him to this breaking point? And most painfully, had the loneliness he carried been deeper than she had ever imagined? In the quiet moments, Emma wrestled with a profound sense of helplessness. How could she support someone who had fallen so far, yet still bore the weight of such power and responsibility? How could she be a beacon of hope when the shadows surrounding Jack seemed so vast? She glanced around the modest apartment, the faded photographs, the mismatched furniture, the small kitchen where they had shared their simple meals. This humble space was now a sanctuary for a man whose life story was as complicated as the city itself. And Emma felt the heavy responsibility of that truth settling on her shoulders. Yet, beneath the shock and disbelief, a quiet determination stirred. Emma realized that Jack's vulnerability was not a weakness, but a testament to his humanity. The fall from grace he had endured did not define him. It was merely a chapter in a story still unfolding. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, trust to rebuild, wounds to heal, and secrets to unravel. But Emma also knew that compassion and understanding were powerful forces. If she could offer Jack a safe harbor, perhaps together they could navigate the storm. Her thoughts shifted to the moments they had shared, the laughter over a burnt dinner, the silent conversations in the early morning light, the tentative steps toward trust. Those memories were a reminder that even in the darkest times, connection could kindle hope. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself against the tide of emotion. The revelation about Jack was not just a shock, it was a call to action. To be more patient, more present, and more open to the complexities of the human spirit. Outside, the rain had finally ceased, leaving the streets glistening under the moonlight. Inside, Emma's resolve hardened. Whatever the past held, whatever secrets lay buried, she would stand beside Jack, not just as a witness to his fall, but as a partner in his rise. In that quiet Brooklyn apartment, two lives intertwined, one grappling with disbelief, the other with the weight of a hidden truth. And as dawn approached, Emma found within herself a fragile hope that together they could face whatever came next. The knock on Emma's door came without warning, sharp, insistent, echoing through the quiet apartment like a sudden thunderclap in the stillness of night. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the faded photo on the nightstand, a snapshot of simpler times, a reminder of the life she hoped to reclaim. The past few days had been a whirlwind of revelations, emotions, and uncertainty. Jack had vanished without a trace, leaving behind questions that weighed heavily on her heart. Her breath hitched as she rose slowly, the knot in her stomach tightening. Who could it be at this hour? She wasn't expecting anyone. The city outside hummed softly, its neon glow filtering through the thin curtains, casting a surreal light across the worn wooden floor. Emma hesitated a moment before reaching for the door handle. The knock came again, urgent and unmistakable. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. There, standing in the dim hallway, was Jack, disheveled, but unmistakably him. His eyes held a storm of emotions: relief, anxiety, determination. His clothes were damp from the night's chill, but there was a newfound strength in his stance, a resolve Emma hadn't seen before. "Emma," he said quietly, voice trembling yet steady. "I need to explain. Please, let me in." Without waiting for her response, he stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded like a closing chapter and the opening of another. Emma watched as Jack removed his soaked jacket, revealing a man caught between worlds, one foot in the shadows of his fabricated downfall, the other tentatively reaching for the light of genuine connection. They sat across from each other in the small living room, the silence thick with anticipation. Jack's eyes met hers, searching, pleading. "What I'm about to tell you, it's the truth, but it's not the whole truth. I faked my downfall, Emma. Everything you've seen, the streets, the hunger, the despair, it was all part of a plan." Emma's heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Why?" she whispered, disbelief mingling with fear. Jack took a shaky breath. "I was trapped. Corporate enemies, people who wanted me gone, to ruin everything I built. They threatened not just my career, but my life. The only way out was to disappear, to fake my ruin and escape their reach." Emma stared at him, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place, yet the weight of his confession pressing down on her chest. The man she had sheltered was not a victim of circumstance, but a strategist fighting a hidden war. "But why come back? Why here?" she asked, voice trembling with a cocktail of emotions. Jack's gaze softened, vulnerability breaking through the armor. "Because I was tired of the lies, the isolation. I wanted to find something real, human connection, something I'd lost in the ruthless world I came from. And you showed me that kindness still exists." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears. The fear that had gripped her slowly gave way to a deep sympathy, mixed with a spark of hope. They talked long into the night, Jack unraveling the tangled threads of his secret life. The corporate battles, the betrayals, the dangers lurking just out of sight. And through it all, the loneliness that drove him to vanish from a world that had turned cold and merciless. Emma listened, her heart aching with every word, understanding for the first time the depths of the man she had come to care for. By dawn, the storm inside her had settled, replaced by a quiet determination. Whatever the past held, they would face it together. In that small Brooklyn apartment, two souls found refuge, not just from the city's cold, but from the shadows of their own lives. And as the first light of morning painted the sky, Emma realized that sometimes the greatest risk was opening your heart to the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. Emma sat on the edge of her worn couch, heart pounding, as Jack's words echoed in the small Brooklyn apartment. The dim glow of the city lights seeped through the threadbare curtains, casting long shadows across the cramped room. Jack's revelation that his downfall was a calculated move to escape enemies intent on destroying him, and his urgent plea for secrecy, had thrown her into a world far beyond anything she'd ever imagined. "Emma," Jack began, his voice low but firm, "I need you to keep this between us. No one else can know who I really am, not yet. If they find out I'm here, it could mean serious danger. For both of us, Emma swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his request pressing down on her chest. She had always been cautious, but the gravity in Jack's tone left no room for doubt or hesitation. This was no longer a simple act of kindness. She was now entangled in a dangerous game of corporate espionage, a battle waged in boardrooms and back alleys, far from the quiet life she had once known. "I understand," she said quietly, meeting his intense gaze. "But why involve me? Why trust me with something so big?" Jack hesitated, then leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Because you're the only one I can trust right now, and because I need someone who isn't part of that world, someone who can see me as a person, not just a CEO or a target." Emma felt a mixture of fear and determination swirling within her. She knew stepping into this shadowy realm would change everything. But turning away now would mean abandoning the man who had, against all odds, found his way into her life. Over the next days, Jack's world unfolded before her in fragments, encrypted messages, clandestine meetings, and whispered threats from unknown enemies. He explained how his once powerful company had been infiltrated by rivals aiming to wrest control through sabotage and deceit. His disappearance was a calculated retreat, a chance to rebuild his strength away from prying eyes. Emma found herself drawn deeper into the web of intrigue. She watched Jack work tirelessly analyzing data, making encrypted calls, coordinating with trusted allies who remained hidden in the shadows. The man she'd known as Broken was, in reality, a strategist, a fighter unwilling to concede defeat. But the stakes were high. The enemies Jack faced were ruthless, unafraid to cross any line. Threats came in the form of anonymous messages, suspicious surveillance, and even subtle warnings left on Emma's doorstep. She realized that by sheltering Jack, she had become a target as well. One night, as they sat huddled over a laptop in the flickering light of a single lamp, Jack looked up with weary eyes. "Emma, I need you to be strong. This won't be easy, but together, we can turn this around." Emma nodded, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. Despite the danger, a fierce resolve ignited within her, a commitment not just to protect Jack, but to fight alongside him for the truth and justice he deserved. As the city's heartbeat pulsed outside their window, Emma and Jack embraced their new reality. The path was fraught with peril, but in their shared courage and trust, they found hope, a beacon guiding them through the darkness toward a future reclaimed. Emma sat quietly in the sleek conference room of a towering Manhattan skyscraper, her heart pounding beneath the tailored blazer she'd borrowed from Jack's office wardrobe. The walls around her gleamed with polished glass, reflecting the city's glittering skyline as dusk settled in. It was a world she had never imagined entering, far removed from her modest Brooklyn apartment, the cheap coffee shops, and the quiet streets she once called home. Yet here she was, immersed in high-stakes business meetings, navigating a labyrinth of corporate intrigue she never anticipated. For weeks now, Emma had been thrust into the complex world of mergers, acquisitions, and power plays. Jack's secret life, a billionaire CEO battling unseen enemies, had become hers to protect. Every interaction, every whispered conversation demanded careful balance. She was not just a bystander, she was a guardian of a fragile secret, a shield against the ruthless forces that sought to tear Jack down. The stakes were immense. Emma quickly learned that the boardroom was a battlefield where alliances shifted like sand, and trust was a luxury no one could afford. She watched as Jack's closest associates exchanged veiled glances, their smiles polite, but eyes sharp with suspicion. Each proposal, each financial report was dissected for weakness, for leverage. Betrayal lurked behind every handshake. Emma's role was unprecedented. No one knew who she really was, just a quiet assistant, shadowing Jack's movements, absorbing details, and protecting his anonymity. She wore the mask well, but inside, the tension coiled tighter every day. One afternoon, as she reviewed a dense packet of documents outlining a hostile takeover bid, a cold realization washed over her. This was bigger than she had thought. The opposition was relentless, willing to manipulate markets, spread misinformation, and exploit personal vulnerabilities to gain control. Jack's comeback was not just a fight for power, it was a fight for survival. Her mind raced, juggling spreadsheets, legal jargon, and the undercurrents of deception swirling around her. Yet, amidst the chaos, Emma found unexpected strength. She had become Jack's confidant, his protector in a world where one misstep could be fatal. The emotional toll was heavy. There were sleepless nights spent poring over contracts, days filled with veiled threats and subtle intimidation. Emma felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, a responsibility not just for Jack's empire, but for the man beneath the title. Outside the meetings, she witnessed moments that revealed Jack's vulnerability, the brief flicker of exhaustion behind his commanding gaze, the way he clung to quiet moments of solitude to gather strength. She understood that beneath the CEO's armor was a man haunted by loss, driven by hope, and sustained by trust she was sworn to protect. Despite the dangers, Emma's resolve hardened. She refused to let fear dictate their fate. Each meeting was a battle, each decision a step toward reclaiming what was lost. And with every challenge, their bond deepened a partnership forged in adversity and anchored by shared courage. In the shadowy corridors of power, Emma learned to navigate the delicate dance of influence and discretion. She became attuned to the subtle cues, the hesitation in a colleague's tone, the glance exchanged between rivals, the silent calculation behind a smile. Her instincts sharpened, her voice steadied. There were moments of doubt, of overwhelming pressure, when the weight of secrecy threatened to crush her. But then she would recall Jack's quiet strength, the faith he placed in her, and the fragile hope they both clung to. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting, Emma stood alone on the rooftop terrace, the city's lights twinkling like stars beneath her. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs, grounding her amidst the storm. This was not the life she had planned, but it was the life she chose for Jack, for herself, and for the promise of a future reclaimed from the shadows. The battle was far from over, but Emma knew one thing with unwavering certainty. Together, they would face whatever came next. Emma sat quietly in the dimly lit corner of her modest Brooklyn apartment, the city's distant hum a constant backdrop to the tangled emotions swirling inside her. Jack sat beside her, their shoulders barely touching, but the space between them charged with a tension neither dared to name aloud. Weeks had passed since the revelation of his true identity, and since then, their lives had become a complex dance, fragile moments of vulnerability intertwined with the looming shadows of corporate warfare and personal danger. Their relationship had deepened in ways Emma hadn't anticipated. Beneath Jack's steely exterior, she glimpsed a man weighed down not only by the burdens of his fall from grace, but by a profound loneliness. At times, he seemed guarded, retreating behind a wall built from years of betrayal and loss. Yet, in the quiet moments they shared, when the city's noise softened to a lull and the harshness of their reality momentarily faded, Jack revealed pieces of himself that spoke of hope, trust, and a desperate yearning for connection. Emma found herself drawn into these moments, her heart aching with empathy and a fierce protectiveness. She understood that their bond was both a sanctuary and a battleground, forged in the crucible of shared fears and uncertain futures. One evening, as rain streaked softly against the windowpane, Jack's hand found hers. The simple gesture spoke volumes, an unspoken promise of solidarity amid the chaos. Emma's breath hitched, emotions flooding her with a mixture of relief and apprehension. In that touch was the fragile thread of trust, delicate yet unbreakable. But the tension was never far away. The threats that stalked Jack's world cast long shadows, intruding even into their most intimate moments. Emma had learned to read the signs, the flicker of anxiety in Jack's eyes, the sudden sharpness in his voice, the way he would instinctively scan a room as if expecting danger to materialize at any moment. Despite the peril, their connection grew. Emma's strength surprised even herself. She navigated the treacherous waters of Jack's double life with determination, balancing fear with courage, uncertainty with resolve. And Jack, in turn, began to lean on her in ways he never had before, sharing his fears, admitting his vulnerabilities, and allowing her into the sanctuary of his guarded heart. Their conversation stretched long into the night talks that peeled back layers of pain and hope, dreams deferred, and the haunting question of what the future might hold. Emma discovered the man beneath the CEO's mask, a man who had once dreamed boldly, lost deeply, and now sought redemption, not just in power, but in genuine human connection. One particularly quiet night, as the city slept and their small apartment stood bathed in moonlight, Jack spoke softly of his fears. "I'm scared, Emma," he confessed. "Scared that no matter how hard I fight, the past will always catch up." Emma squeezed his hand gently. "We face it together. You're not alone anymore." In the face of looming threats, their bond became a lifeline, a beacon of hope that shimmered against the darkness. And though uncertainty loomed large, Emma and Jack found solace in the knowledge that, together, they could weather any storm. Their story was one of contrasts of vulnerability and strength, fear and trust, darkness and light. And within that delicate balance, they discovered a connection that transcended circumstance, a love born not from ease, but from the courage to face life's challenges hand in hand. Emma sat quietly by the window of her modest Brooklyn apartment, the fading light casting soft shadows on the worn wooden floorboards. The city outside buzzed with life cars honking, distant sirens, the murmur of conversations drifting through the thin walls. But inside, the room felt heavy with memories she had long tried to bury. Tonight, her past was no longer a secret she could keep locked away. It was a part of her story, intertwined with the present, in ways she was only beginning to understand. Growing up wasn't easy for Emma. Raised by a single mother who juggled multiple jobs to make ends meet, Emma learned early what it meant to struggle. Their small apartment in Queens was cramped and noisy, a world away from the glass towers and glossy facades she now glimpsed from Jack's office windows. There were nights when the electricity was cut off because the bills couldn't be paid on time, and days when food was scarce, forcing Emma to rely on the kindness of neighbors or school lunches just to get through. Despite the hardships, Emma's mother never gave up. She was a pillar of strength, always reminding Emma that education was the key to a better life. Emma took those words to heart, dedicating herself to schoolwork with a fierce determination. But even with scholarships and part-time jobs, the weight of responsibility was heavy. She worked long hours, cleaning offices late at night, waiting tables on weekends, anything to keep the lights on and put food on the table. There were moments of doubt, times when Emma felt overwhelmed by the constant grind, questioning whether she would ever escape the cycle of poverty. But through it all, she held on to a quiet hope, a belief that her life could be more than the sum of her struggles. Meeting Jack had stirred something unexpected in her. Here was a man who seemed to carry his own scars, yet his presence brought a strange comfort. But Emma knew that to truly move forward, she needed to face her past head-on. One evening, as the rain tapped gently against the window, Emma shared her story with Jack. Her voice trembled at first, but with each word she found strength in vulnerability. She spoke of childhood nights spent lying awake in the dark, listening to her mother's exhausted sighs, of missed opportunities and the sting of rejection, of the countless times she had been told she wasn't enough, that her dreams were too big for someone like her. Jack listened intently, his usual guarded demeanor softening. He reached out, taking her hand in his, a silent gesture of support. "You're stronger than you know, Emma," he said quietly. "Your resilience is inspiring." Emma smiled faintly, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Sharing her past didn't make her weak. It connected her to the man beside her in a deeper way. Her struggles had shaped her, forged a resilience that now fueled her determination to stand beside Jack, facing the battles ahead together. As the night deepened, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her past was not just a story of hardship, it was a testament to her strength, a foundation upon which she could build a future filled with hope and possibility. Together, Emma and Jack embraced their intertwined journeys, finding in each other the courage to heal and the strength to fight for a life reclaimed from the shadows. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the sharp knock echoed through the dimly lit apartment. The sound, sudden and jarring against the silence of the Brooklyn night, sent a ripple of dread racing down her spine. She exchanged a quick, tense glance with Jack, whose eyes darkened with a cold resolve she had never seen before. They had known the risk, the danger lurking just beyond the fragile walls of their refuge. But now, that danger was no longer a shadow. It was a pounding presence at their door, threatening to shatter everything they had fought to protect. Jack's former enemies had found them. For weeks, Emma and Jack had navigated the precarious world of corporate warfare and personal vendettas, each day a delicate balance between survival and secrecy. They had taken every precaution, changing locations, using untraceable phones, and keeping a low profile. But the past, as relentless as the city's unyielding heartbeat, had finally caught up. The knock came again, harder this time, sending a shiver through Emma's frame. She gripped Jack's hand tightly, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "Stay quiet," Jack whispered, moving swiftly to the side window. Peering through the thin curtain, he spotted shadows moving in the dim glow of the streetlight, figures watching, waiting. Emma's mind raced. Who were they? How many? What did they want? The uncertainty was a suffocating weight, each unanswered question fueling a growing panic. Jack turned away from the window, his expression grim. "They're not here to negotiate," he said flatly. "We have to be ready." The apartment, once a sanctuary of fragile hope, transformed into a fortress. Jack moved with practiced precision, securing windows and doors, gathering essentials, a small bag of documents, a concealed weapon, and a burner phone. Emma followed, her heart pounding as adrenaline surged through her veins. The hours that followed were a tense blur of whispered plans and watchful waiting. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren sent them both into heightened alert. They communicated in hushed tones, eyes scanning shadows and listening for the faintest sign of intrusion. Emma found herself relying on Jack's strength, his unwavering calm amidst chaos. Yet, beneath his stoic exterior, she sensed a storm of fear and determination, a man fighting not just for survival, but for redemption. The knock came once more, relentless and commanding. Jack approached the door cautiously, then pressed his ear against it. Voices murmured beyond cold, calculating, filled with menace. Emma's breath hitched as she clutched a small knife, ready to defend. The tension was electric, a knife edge between hope and disaster. Suddenly, the door rattled violently. The attackers were trying to break in. Jack's voice was a low growl. "Get to the back. I'll hold them off." Emma hesitated, the fear of leaving him alone battling shadows almost paralyzing. But survival demanded sacrifice. With trembling hands, she slipped through the narrow hallway to a hidden exit Jack had prepared, heart pounding as she fled into the night. Outside, the city felt both familiar and alien. The distant lights blurred by rain, the streets empty and unforgiving. Emma ran, every step echoing the urgency of their escape. Behind her, the sound of crashing and shouting confirmed the violence unfolding within. For hours, she navigated dark alleys and side streets, the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Would Jack be safe? Could they regroup? The questions were relentless, but surrender was not an option. As dawn approached, Emma found a temporary refuge in a small deserted park. She sank onto a bench, exhaustion and fear washing over her. But even in the quiet moments, resolve flickered, a determination to fight, to protect, to survive. Back at the apartment, Jack fought with a ferocity born of desperation. The clash was brutal, a battle of wills and strength against overwhelming odds. He moved with a calculated fury, each strike a statement of defiance against the forces seeking to destroy him. Hours later, battered but unbroken, Jack escaped through a concealed passage, meeting Emma at a prearranged safe house. Their reunion was silent but powerful. Two souls bound by adversity and unyielding hope. In the days that followed, they rebuilt, strategized, and prepared for the challenges ahead. The threat was far from over, but their bond had deepened, forged in fire, tempered by trust, and strengthened by love. Emma and Jack faced the uncertain future together, ready to confront the shadows and reclaim their lives from the brink of destruction. Emma sat across from Jack in the dimly lit conference room of a discreet downtown office, the glow from the laptop screen illuminating their determined faces. The air was thick with tension and anticipation as they prepared to execute a plan months in the making, a brilliant strategy to reclaim Jack's position and expose the corrupt forces that had sought to destroy him. This was their moment. Failure wasn't an option. Jack leaned forward, voice steady but low. "We've been patient. We've waited for the right time, and now it's here. With your help, Emma, we're going to turn the tables." Emma nodded, her heart pounding. Since Jack's fall from grace and subsequent disappearance into the shadows of the city, she had become his closest ally and confidant. Together, they had navigated a maze of deceit and danger, piecing together evidence, gaining allies, and preparing a counterattack that would shake the very foundations of the corporate empire that had betrayed him. The corrupt board members and rivals who had orchestrated Jack's downfall thought he was finished, but they had underestimated the resilience of a man who had lost everything and was ready to fight back. Jack opened a file on his laptop, confidential emails, financial reports, and internal communications that exposed the illegal activities and manipulations engineered by his adversaries. "These documents," he explained, "prove the conspiracy to sabotage my company. But we need more than proof. We need to control the narrative and rally support." Emma tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "We have contacts in the media and the legal world who can help. We just need to coordinate carefully to avoid tipping off the enemy." The plan was intricate. Leak the documents strategically to trusted journalists, leverage whistleblower testimonies, and launch a simultaneous public relations campaign that would expose the corruption while highlighting Jack's vision for a reformed company. Over the next several days, Emma threw herself into the work with relentless focus. She coordinated with investigative reporters, helped draft compelling narratives, and managed communications to ensure the message reached the right ears without compromising their position. Jack, meanwhile, met with loyal executives and legal experts, rallying support behind the scenes. Their partnership deepened in these high-pressure moments, Emma's unwavering commitment fueling Jack's resolve, while his gratitude and respect strengthened her own confidence. Together, they became a formidable force. One evening, after a particularly intense meeting, Jack looked at Emma and said, "I couldn't have done this without you. You're not just my ally. You're the reason I believe we can win." Emma smiled, touched by his words, but focused on the task at hand. "We win together. That's the only way." As the media began to break the story, public opinion shifted dramatically. The expose revealed the depth of deceit and greed, sparking investigations and shareholder unrest. The corrupt board members found themselves under scrutiny, their power unraveling. Jack seized the momentum, making a public statement that combined humility with a visionary promise. "We've faced dark times," he said, "but together we can rebuild stronger, more transparent, and more just." The boardroom battles intensified, but Jack's coalition held firm, buoyed by public support and renewed corporate ethics initiatives. Finally, the day came when Jack was officially reinstated as CEO. Emma stood by his side at the announcement, the room filled with applause and renewed hope. The fight had been arduous, but justice had prevailed. In the quiet moments afterward, Jack turned to Emma and said, "This victory is ours. You gave me the strength to fight, and together, we reclaimed more than a company. We reclaimed our dignity." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the journey they'd undertaken. From strangers to partners in battle, they had forged an unbreakable bond rooted in trust, courage, and unwavering hope. Their story was far from over, but in that moment, beneath the bright lights and cheers, Emma knew that with Jack by her side, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The bright glare of the cameras was almost blinding as Jack stepped onto the stage of the Grand Press Conference Hall in downtown Manhattan. Reporters' voices mingled in a cacophony of questions, flashes from countless cameras punctuating the air like lightning strikes. The city's heartbeat echoed through the streets outside, but inside, everything seemed to slow to a trembling stillness. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the sea of faces before him. Behind the polished suit and poised demeanor was a man who had walked through fire and shadows, who had clawed his way back from the brink of ruin. Tonight was the night he would reclaim his truth, not just as a CEO, but as a man who had found hope and strength in the most unexpected place. Beside him stood Emma, her presence a steady beacon of calm amid the storm. The woman who had seen his vulnerabilities, shared his fears, and stood unwaveringly by his side through every twist and turn. Jack's heart swelled with gratitude, and as he glanced at her, he knew this moment was as much hers as it was his. "Good evening," Jack began, his voice strong and clear, resonating through the hall. "Tonight I stand before you not just as the CEO of this company, but as a man who has been tested in ways few could imagine. For months I have battled forces that sought to destroy not only my career, but my very identity. Lies were spread, trust was broken, and shadows loomed over everything I held dear." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The room fell into a hush, the tension palpable. "But through this darkness," he continued, "I was not alone. I found strength in a remarkable woman, Emma. Her courage, her unwavering belief in truth, gave me the resolve to fight back. Tonight, I want to honor her bravery, her kindness, and the light she brought into my life when I needed it most." Emma's cheeks flushed as applause rippled through the crowd. She glanced at Jack, her eyes shining with emotion. In that moment, they were no longer just two individuals tangled in a web of deceit and danger. They were partners, bound by resilience and trust. Jack turned back to the audience, the cameras capturing every word. "The truth has a way of coming to light. The corrupt forces that conspired against us have been exposed. Justice is being served, and this company will rise from these trials stronger and more united than ever." The room erupted into questions, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Reporters clamored for details, eager to uncover the full story behind the scandal that had rocked the corporate world. Jack answered each with honesty and conviction, never faltering. Outside the hall, the city buzzed with renewed energy. Social media erupted with news of Jack's revelation, with countless voices praising the courage it took to stand up against such overwhelming odds. Emma watched the unfolding events with a mixture of pride and relief, knowing the road ahead would still hold challenges, but also endless possibilities. Later, as the press conference ended and the crowd began to disperse, Jack and Emma stepped away from the spotlight, seeking solace in a quiet corner of the building. "You were incredible," Jack said softly, taking Emma's hands in his. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Emma smiled, her heart full. "We did this together. Your strength inspired me just as much as I hope I inspired you." For the first time in months, the weight of their ordeal lifted, replaced by a shimmering hope. Jack looked into Emma's eyes, seeing not just a companion, but a future, one filled with promise and healing. "Where do we go from here?" Emma asked, her voice gentle yet filled with curiosity. Jack's gaze softened. "Anywhere we want, together." As they left the building, the cool night air wrapped around them like a fresh beginning. The city's lights sparkled like 1,000 possibilities, each one a step toward the future they would build side by side. The story of Jack and Emma was far from over, but tonight marked a new chapter, one of truth, courage, and love. And as the city pulsed around them, they faced it not with fear, but with a hopeful heart and unwavering faith in each other. Life sometimes places us in unexpected and challenging situations, forcing us to face obstacles that seem insurmountable. The story of Jack and Emma is not only about two people meeting under difficult circumstances, but also a powerful lesson about kindness, perseverance, and the strength found in genuine human connection. One of the deepest messages from their story is that no matter where you are or what hardships you face, kindness and sharing remain the light that guides us through the darkest times. Compassion doesn't just help others, it also empowers ourselves. Emma, despite her own financial struggles, did not hesitate to open her home and heart to Jack, a stranger in the crowded city. This simple act demonstrates courage and a belief in the intrinsic value of people, that everyone deserves love and a chance to rebuild their life. In today's fast-paced, competitive world, we sometimes forget that listening, understanding, and helping each other are what truly makes society humane. Additionally, the story highlights the importance of patience and trust. Jack couldn't open up easily because his painful past and deep fears weighed heavily on him. But Emma was persistent, never rushing to judge, and gradually built a foundation of trust, helping him realize that no one has to face their struggles alone. This reminds us that everyone has their own story, and sometimes what they need most is someone patient to walk alongside them, to understand and never give up. Finally, Jack and Emma's story is a reminder of authenticity and the power of genuine human connection. In a modern world filled with virtual relationships and social distance, sincere connections based on empathy and understanding are what sustain us. Jack's decision to fake his downfall to escape his enemies was not just an act of survival, but also a symbol of his longing to find his true self and meaningful relationships. From their story, we can learn to cherish inner values, face our past courageously to move forward, and continually offer kindness, regardless of how difficult our circumstances may be. When we open our hearts, accept, and share, life becomes not just a personal journey, but a meaningful connection among kindred souls. Thank you for watching this touching Millionaire Stories video on Stories TH. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more inspiring content. See you in the next video.